grow, that need to grow in the kinds of complex projects that we were taking on. Also was the era that John and I were asked to join the firm to bring additional design leadership and management leadership to a growing and increasingly complex firm operation. Unfortunately, Jack Kirsten, who's here in the red box, passed away at a very young age in 1993. And this is a picture of a guy who's sitting out here in the crowd, Lester Escobar, who was the winner of the first Jack Smith Kirsten Scholarship that Brian spoke about. The firm, along with Jack's family and his friends, came together to honor him by establishing that scholarship. And we're all very proud of what it's been able to do in providing scholarships and internships for so many students here at the university. And so there's Lester with his proud mother and shaking hands with Cookie Kirsten, who was Jack's wife. And of course, this represents the third generation of the firm, Cody Gallas and Partners era. John, who is a brilliant and creative man who I stand beside every day in the work that we do. He and I together bring this notion of 100% design and 100% business. And that balance is really important to a successful firm. I think some of the other partnerships we have are here at the University of Maryland, where so many of you are graduates of the program, have come to work and help us do what we do every day. We value that partnership very much. And this is obviously all the people, many of them are here tonight, that we work with every day to accomplish all the work that I'm going to be talking about in a little bit. So the firm went from being architects of the Washington suburbs to a firm that is now working in 100 cities and a dozen countries throughout the world. Our award-winning work has designed housing for over 1 million people. That's over almost 500,000 housing units. So this is a tremendous responsibility, and it affects the way we think about the future, because our work has already impacted so many people. Many of you may even live in a home or a place that Cody Gallas designed. We're also very proud of the diversity of the firm. We have people from 24 different nationalities working at Cody Gallas. And it's always been that way. It started with Jack Cohen, who believed in a diverse set of voices to come together to find creative solutions to the work that we do. And so, Architects of Community for the last 25 years has been about designing walkable, connected, contextual, sustainable, and inextricable buildings, neighborhoods, and communities that positively contribute to the lives of the people who live, work, shop, and play in them. As we started to grow our footprint to other places around the world, we needed some tools. We knew that we couldn't take just our lens from the work that we're doing here in the Washington area or in other places in the country to necessarily find solutions in places like India or China or the Middle East. And so we created this tool called Transnational Urbanism, or TNU, as a way to dissect the community DNA of the places in which we work by looking at the history, the culture, the traditions, and the context of those places. So that we weren't coming and saying, I'm from Washington, I'm here to help you. We were saying, let us learn from you. Let us understand your world so that we can help to create a great solution that brings wonderful design to your community. So we work all over the world, and these community designs are built on a concept which we call the inextricable link between the planning, the urban design, and the architectural solution as a single idea. So we're not thinking of them as separate notions, but as one holistic approach to solving the problems of designing great communities. Like this community here in Istanbul, Turkey, called Kemer Country. When we first took on this commission, they asked John, well, bring us a colonial type of housing solution from America. And John said, no, we can't do that. You have wonderful architectural history and culture here. Let's take the traditional Turkish architecture style and let's enhance it and interpret it in a way that will meet the needs of today's contemporary lifestyles. And so we also worked in lots of places around the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi. This is a town in Abu Dhabi called Al Ain, and it's a community that was a former palm tree farm, and they came to us to try to create housing for Emiratis living in this city. So our work was really about creating walkable communities that relate to the culture, history, tradition, and context of this community. And at Al-Fawj Al-Foa, we understood the need for residents to thrive in a hot and dry climate by designing houses with thicker walls and courtyards where the sense of privacy and the ability to be outside in the shade could occur within one's private home area. Closer to home here, the King Farm in Rockville is another master plan that was designed using the new urbanist principles of walkability, connection, and this notion of inextricability. So this 440-acre new town plan was really exemplifies the principles of the new urbanism. With a variety of housing types, styles, and scales that meet the needs of singles, of families, of seniors, all living together in a community, a walkable community setting. And in Barrington, Illinois, another example, this is a suburb of Chicago where we were asked to design a senior housing community that would be inserted into an existing village called Barrington. And so the garlands of Barrington were designed, and what's interesting about Barrington, Illinois is it has a English Tudor style of architecture that it primarily represents. And so we built upon that notion to create housing that would meet the needs of seniors, but in a way that was comfortable within the context of its existing environment. So this kind of English Tudor response was a way of sort of connecting the seniors so that they weren't separated from the broader village in which they lived. And over the years, we've also done a lot of urban repair, like here in Baltimore, where we tore down the isolated public housing towers that were built in superblocks and put back the original street grid and designed housing that was more in context with the traditional urban Baltimore row house. So while the book, Architects of Community, marks some of our accomplishments over the last couple of decades, we now need to ask ourselves, how do we intend to go forward from architects of community to becoming architects of a better world? Now I'm going to describe 3 platforms of our plan for how we intend to do that in the future. There are 3 important elements of our vision for our firm's future. They include asking ourselves, how can we continue to be catalysts for transformation in the neighborhoods in which we live and work? Secondly, what's our responsibility to make a better world? As architects, we're designing things that are going to be here for long after we're gone. And we see that now by looking at some of the firm's early work and understanding that it's still there. And do we still love it? Is it something that is still meeting the needs of the communities in which we're working? And so how do we accept that responsibility and then make sure that we leave the world better than the way we found it? And then lastly, how do we manage change? How do we anticipate change that is a constant part of what you as young architects are going to be faced with as you look for solutions in your design work going forward? So let me go through each of these a little bit. I sometimes think of us as pioneers. Some of the work that our firm does, we're sort of early responders. We're coming into a community that has had tremendous disinvestment often. And so it creates a tremendous responsibility to, in effect, set the community to sail in the right direction, raising the bar to enhance the quality of that community so that others will follow in a positive way. So at this point in our practice, we now also are coming to the realization that our work is not only about the physical elements of what we do, but how it's transforming people's lives as well. First project I'd like to talk about that evidences this sort of impact of transformation is a neighborhood called Arthur Capper, which is in southeast Washington, D.C. Maybe up here, Brian told me I have to use this pointer. This is the United States Capitol here. This is Robert F. Kennedy Stadium here, the big donut, and the Anacostia River. And so you can start to see that this is a community that is sort of hemmed between Southeast Freeway, this highway here, and the Anacostia River. Arthur Capper, when we started working here, was a scary place. It was not some place that people with choice decided to live in. This was a place that if you had no other option, you would live here. And so, as you can see, it was almost intentionally cut off from the street. This is the end of the street. You can see the highway going over the top. There's really not a lot of interest in having people living in this community engaging with the broader part of Washington at that time. And so we worked with residents to understand their needs and how we could rebuild their homes. So wedged in between the Southeast Freeway and what was then a very polluted Anacostia River, we began to redesign the community in a way that started to look at the connections between the U.S. Capitol and the waterfront. And we looked at the L'Enfant plan, which of course didn't have a Southeast Freeway running through it at the time. And so we took away the freeway. We said, let's imagine what would the city's grid of blocks and streets look like, and what should they look like in order to not only rehouse the 550 families and seniors who lived there when we started, but to house 1,500 housing units. So we tripled the density in this neighborhood. And so in order to do that, that grid of streets was a very important aspect of our work. So as we began to rebuild this multi-phase neighborhood revitalization of Arthur Capper, we started to see other changes occurring in the city. So back in 2003, when we began, none of this was here. You were, in essence, if your neighbors were the warehouses, the dive bars, the concrete plants, those sorts of things. And so now, all of a sudden, we've got, whoops, a baseball stadium. Where'd that come from? No one would have ever thought to build a baseball stadium there in 2003 because it was never seen as a part of the city that anyone would want to go to. And so also the U.S. Department of Transportation headquarters was built on M Street, across the street. So we started to see this change coming, and today there's housing, there's restaurants, there's a canal park that really creates an outdoor amenity for the entire broader community. There are office buildings, there are grocery stores. I mean, they now call this the Capitol Riverfront District, which it has a name. It had no name. No one even knew it existed just 15 years ago. So I think, so the revitalization of this undesirable, unsafe, disinvested community sparked a dramatic transformation in this part of the city. People are now paying $1 million to buy these townhomes, living next door to someone who is on welfare. And I assure you, you can't distinguish between who lives where. I think it's a very important aspect of this work. And so the Capitol Riverfront District now boasts over 3,000 housing units and growing, 7 million square feet of office space, dozens and dozens of restaurants, and, of course, a Major League Baseball park. So the revitalization of Arthur Capper has sparked a renaissance in this part of the city that's resulted in a 24/7 existence. Here, you're seeing in the background U.S. Department of Transportation headquarters building, designed by, I believe, Michael Graves, and Canal Park, which is a tremendous outdoor amenity for the entire community. You're also seeing trendy shops and restaurants, and of course, a new Major League Baseball park that will be the sort of place where the Major League All-Star Baseball game will happen this year. Could never have imagined this 15 years ago. Another example of how our work has been a catalyst for transformation is this area of 14th Street, which we call Columbia Heights. This was in the 1940s and 50s and even early 60s a vibrant commercial street with housing and an important residential community as well. And as Brian said, and I've got the same image he's got, that 50 years ago, when Martin Luther King was tragically assassinated, it sparked riots in the city that devastated this area and forever changed life in this part of the city. And it's amazing that here we are 50 years later to the day here to talk about it. It's quite remarkable. So let's fast forward now to the city starting to think about building a metro system, which was a huge infrastructure investment. And one of the most brilliant things that they did was they planned the Green Line, which is, this is, by the way, Georgia 7th Street, which becomes Georgia Avenue up past Petworth here. But they decided to make a huge left turn toward U Street and 14th Street along, essentially, to help rebuild this part of the city that was so devastated by those riots. And so, talk about a catalyst. As my partner John said the other day, development used to happen and used to follow the sewer lines. Now, development follows transit a really important part of the dominoes that helped to rebuild this community. So here in 2002, you're seeing the remnants of, they built the new metro system now. That over on the right-hand side, you can see the Columbia Heights Metro Pavilion, the escalators that go down to the station. And, essentially, this was a vacant place. What should happen here? So the community came together, and there were a number of community charrettes to envision a walkable, mixed-use place. A place that would be built around transit. And fortunately for us, 40 Gallas and Partners won 3 different design competitions with different developer teams to redevelop this part of Columbia Heights. Those are the buildings shown in red that we designed. So the vision for Columbia Heights was to think about, yes, how does this feel within a transit-oriented development with affordable senior housing and market-rate condominiums and apartments that would fill this particular block called Canyon Square. This is one large development that we decided to break into 3 urban increments in order to convey the notion that this community was built on time, over time, as opposed to in one single response. And that vision is now transferred into this reality today, remarkably the same as the vision that was originally conceived. With mixed use in the base of all the buildings, the seniors who live in this low-income housing building called Victory Heights, literally they leave their front door and they're 30 steps away from the metro station. So it's really a wonderful opportunity for people to be able to move through the city and be adjacent to market rate apartments and condominiums. And of course, a very active and walkable place, a place that now they also added DC USA, which is a large retail environment that also has helped to support the growth. And then safe and walkable and bikeable streets and sidewalks in this community were key to its success. So while all of this started with obviously what was a very tragic event 50 years ago, is now something that we can all be proud of how the city and the community came together to rebuild this part of the city. The second platform I'd like to talk about is, as architects, what's our responsibility to the world that we live in? After 65 years of practice, we realized that the buildings we're designing, the places we're designing, are going to be here for 50, 100 years or more, hopefully. And so, as we think about how they're impacting the communities, not only the physical part of the community, but the lives of the people who live in this community, it's an important consideration that we need to bring to our work every day. So, understanding our responsibility to be architects of a better world by leaving the world better than how we found it. We do this in a lot of ways. Our firm comes together through active community outreach and supporting a number of community groups and causes that are important to us, and also through sort of a slew of firm community activities, whether it's dressing up for Halloween, or the yoga club, or running club, or napkin sketch, or just a variety of activities the firm engages in. But as we try to understand our responsibility to be sustainable leaders in the design work that we do, we can look for inspiration in a lot of different places. So one of those is a kind of a prescient quote from Thomas Jefferson back in 1789. And he said that the earth belongs to each generation. The second generation receives it clear of the debts and encumbrances of the first, the third of the second, and so on. So no generation can contract debts greater than may be paid during the course of its own existence. So how do we explain this? Don't we really need a lot of inspiration today? In 2017, we reached the Earth Overshoot Day on August 2nd. So that means that the resources that the Earth has to give all of us as humans in occupying the Earth, we used them up by August 2nd of last year. That's the earliest it's been since we've been measuring this since 1969. It's not good. Sometimes bar charts are good, like if you're talking about counting revenue or profits or something, the higher the better. This is not the higher the better. It's the opposite. So we are literally every year above this January 1st line, which happened starting in 1971 until today. We are borrowing from resources of the future in order to live today. And so if that doesn't motivate all of us as architects who are responsible for creating the world that people are going to live in, then I don't know what does. So at Torrey Gallas, we believe that there is an interdependency between economic prosperity, environmental quality, and social equity for current and future generations. And an abrupt and irreversible damage will occur if we don't take immediate action. So we developed a tool which we call Spectrum, which is a way for us to think about holistic design solutions that are looking at the natural systems, the built environment, and people, and how our design solutions are realizing human sustainability by looking at all of these in one holistic way. So, by designing over 80 projects around transit, our firms developed quite a bit of urban TOD and mixed-use kind of expertise. But we also realized that we're making a difference toward making the world a better place when we can see that 162,000 people are living and working in Torrey Gallas design TODs. And we're reducing cars, we're taking cars off the road, we're reducing CO2 and essentially saving energy by creating places where people can utilize mass transit, to walk, to find the things they need for their daily lives, whether it's work, shop, dine, whatever. We're also beginning to measure lately, and Greg Goldstein's helped us with this over the winter break, to measure and connect the impact of our designs that are having on healthy outcomes. And so we've started to create something called a Community Health Report Card, which helps us to quantify the impact of active lifestyles on preventable outcomes. So as we look at our work, some of the results that have occurred from the body of work of our firm is that we've reduced hypertension, diabetes, obesity. We're also further limiting hospital costs and medical costs and hospital visits. So this is a gratifying way to start to measure our impact. What is our result for the work that we're doing? Is it just a project or is it more? How do we think of this as a way to contribute to making a better world? We're also very conscious of some of the work that we're designing and the impact that they're having on the environment. This is a neighborhood in Tacoma, Washington, called Salishan, so it's the other Washington on the West Coast. And this is what it looked like when we began. This neighborhood was built in the 1940s for worker housing, and it was temporary housing. It was not meant to be standing 60 years later. But it was built really for people who were working in the shipyards of the Tacoma Bay during World War II. The 60 years later, it was still permanent housing for a diverse community, and it needed to be rebuilt. So we work with the community to design more sustainable housing and promote healthy living at the same time. And while we were at it, we also saw an opportunity to heal the land. So what you're looking at here on the right is the T Street Gulch. I love the Gulch. I used to watch cartoons, and there was a Gulch Street gang, you know, when they never knew what a gulch was. But this is a gulch. It's a sort of a depression in the earth that moves water through. And so the original design of Salishan was to, in essence, funnel all the stormwater, and it rains a lot in the state of Washington, by the way, to funnel all the stormwater down into the gulch and move it off the site as quickly as possible. But what we found out as we began to do our research of this community is that the coho salmon, which are protected by the United States Endangered Species Act, you were wondering what that was, weren't you? They spawn in the tributaries of what was fed by the T Street Gulch. And so we had to find another way to keep that stormwater from moving into the gulch and in essence, killing the coho salmon. And so our response was a low-impact design that was built around the notion of slowing the water down, in essence, making running water walk through a series of bioretention swales that would collect and filter stormwater before moving off-site or entering the aquifer. We also replaced all the housing. This is what it looked like when we began. This is what it is today, providing comfortable and diverse housing types for renters and homeowners. And we're very proud of the fact that 91 of these homes were LEED Platinum homes. Another method of sort of taking measure. It's not the only measure, certainly, but one of how we can take measure over how we're making a better world. In a walkable community that today is reconnecting itself with the Tacoma Bay, where its roots began. One final community that I want to talk about is the West Lawn community in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This is another public housing community that looks like many other public housing neighborhoods. They're kind of indistinguishable barrack-style housing. And when we began working with the residents to create a vision for a connected and walkable place, they spoke passionately about creating a more sustainable and a more healthy place. And so it was really a great inspiration to start to engage the community and engage the school and begin, which is in the middle of this community, to in essence adopt a curriculum and adopt a community garden that we built about 30,000 square feet area adjacent to the school, with the idea that we could connect the students' learning and their parents' learning about how healthy food grows and how it thrives and inspires those of us to eat more healthily. the styles of architecture here were blended together to also create sort of an important look to the future, positive outcome from the work that we're doing in this community. And it's really one of the most sustainable neighborhoods in the world. It achieved a LEED ND Stage 3 silver rating, which was the world's first and highest rating, and numerous LEED platinum homes. And this is in one of the coldest climates in the United States, which I think is very important, particularly for people who don't have a lot of money to pay for heating and that sort of thing. And so, when we look to the sense of pride and community that has come out of this neighborhood revitalization, we know that we're contributing to a better world. The last platform I'd like to talk about is how we think about change. Remember, we started this talk about change and evolution, and that it is a reality and it's happening faster and faster. And as architects, we're all going to be challenged with finding solutions that aren't going to create places that are really need to be replaced 10 years later. These communities have to be resilient. They have to be able to respond to the changing needs of the world. And so, most of the people, we have to understand that the people's needs 50 and 100 years from now are going to require us to think about those things today. And so, asking ourselves, how will people live in a changing world is an important piece. And so, when we approach this work, it isn't so much that we have all the answers at Gallas and Partners, but what we do is we must ask questions. So questions like, how are we thinking about the diverse mix of needs the communities will face in the future? Or how can we create places for people to come together to strengthen their communities? Or how are we addressing rapid urbanization, like here in Shanghai, in Pudong, where in 1990 this community looked like this, and 20 years later it looks like this. Not that we think this is necessarily a good answer, probably not the one that we would have presented. But the point is, we must have an answer. Urbanization is happening. We need to be able to respond to this rapidly changing environment. Also, new transportation options are now available to us. How is that affecting designs of the places that we're working? With plug-in vehicles and various forms of mass transit and autonomous vehicles, which are today very much in the news because we're trying to understand how this can be implemented safely. And yet, we know that these changes are coming and that we have to design for solutions for these. And how are we designing and planning for other disruptions in the marketplace? Growing up, who didn't go to Toys R Us? I mean, can you imagine a world that doesn't have Toys R Us? And yet, it's happening. And it's happening because retail stores are being dramatically impacted by changes in online shopping. And then there's how we deal with the deliveries. This is a residential community that wasn't designed that long ago. But it was designed long enough ago, like 5 years ago, that we didn't have the dramatic amount of quantity of online shopping. And so that's how rapid the changes are occurring. But now, because of technology, we're using these sorts of systems where today, if you're at work or at school and you get a delivery, you get an email that says you have a package, it was delivered, and it's in box number 34, and here's the code. And when you get home, you can just pick it up. And it's safe and secure and neatly managed. So we can adapt to change, but we must anticipate that change. And speaking of delivery, how will we deal with these kinds of deliveries going forward? Quite a remarkable thing that we could see happening in the future. In fact, apartments today are being designed to have package drop-off by drones that will land on your balcony. I mean, these kinds of things are in our world now. And so we don't even see drones necessarily yet, but in a few years, they're going to be an important part of our world. So what will we do with these experiences and these expensive, empty parking lots? Our clients tell us every day how expensive it is to build parking, and we'd like to not build it. So are we going to, will it be expensive storage for our packages? Or, as I saw one of the students here, the solution was a daycare center, which was an interesting one. But regardless of the solution, it's important that architects think about and find answers to these problems. This is how we at Torrey Gallas are addressing them. Maybe you'll come join us to find answers together. Thank you very much.
Is there any questions?
For your slides that we have, where you have the anxiety and anxiety and all the things going down, that spaces that are so close to transportation and other places that allow people to walk through, to interact with communities, like in yoga or
Yes, I mean, all of those things. We're, in designing walkable urban places that offer mixed-use opportunities for people to be able to walk to and have healthy options for walking to schools, to work, to grocery stores, to their daily needs. And instead of the suburban model, which of course is about getting our car and driving everywhere. And so we compared two communities, for instance, exactly the same, except one was suburban and one was urban, and started to extrapolate the kinds of results that are happening because of design in these communities that we've been designing for now several decades. Yes.
I thought it was interesting to know, our previous lecture with Dr. Wilson, we spoke about how historic buildings, instead of the lens of materiality or time, we can get a glimpse of like reasons of trade or political reasons of how a construction was taken out of phases. And then we jump to, I building back then, they 100 years ago, we jump to like that last sentence and showed of Shanghai and the city happened in a matter of years. You spoke about how some of your buildings you purposely divide into phases to show an illusion of time. Can you speak to maybe why you found that was important to show?
Well, we think that cities are diverse and they are more interesting to pass and experience if there is sort of an urban increment that engages you as you walk or as you pass by those communities. We also think people enjoy living and experiencing the identity of the place that they live. Here in the United States, we call this the American dream, right? I live there, and I'm proud of where I live. It reflects who I am. And so if, as new urbanists, one of the things that we believe in is that we're not designing buildings that are the same throughout, but rather they create, they relate to one another, they relate to the context of their setting, but they offer sort of a variety and so that they don't feel monolithic, they don't feel overbearing to pedestrians or people experiencing the buildings. Yeah.
I know you mentioned like development over time as well as community involvement that the firm has. So as you're working with the community to rebuild or revitalize the area, how many of them come back after the revitalization? Is there a way that you keep track of that?
That's a great question. I think there's been a fair amount of criticism about that. As an example, part of what happens when you sort of tear down something and have to rebuild it, it happens over a number of years. And so people relocate. Now maybe they'll come back, and often they do, but sometimes they don't want to come back because they've now put down new roots in a new place, their children go to a different school, they've made new relationships, and so you can't necessarily make people come back, but we need to offer those options. So most of the projects that we work in, the options are offered to the residents who are displaced, and then they decide. Now, one of the things in the early days of some of the neighborhood revitalization work, where that didn't happen, particularly where people were not in compliance with their leases or things like that. So if they, let's say, were habitual drug users or things like that, then they weren't invited back. So those, really, we had nothing to do with that one way or the other, but the housing authorities, the government agencies who do work with the residents and monitor where they've been moved to and when they're coming back. There are also programs for helping them to build their credit scores or job training, those kinds of things, so that they can also come back and contribute in a different way or participate in a different way in their communities. So it's really a range of things that happen, but it is one of the most proud moments that I can tell you about. A neighborhood in Philadelphia that I worked on called Martin Luther King Plaza. When this was a 10-year project, it took that long to demolish the towers, design the building, build the buildings, and it was great. It was with great pride that I saw several of the people that we worked with early on coming back and moving back into the community. But that's not always the case. That's absolutely not always the case. Yeah.
The first project you spoke about, the community was cut off from the rest of the world by the freeway. What other problems have you found where the solution that was there was causing that block between that community and the rest of the world?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the affordable housing that was built in the United States in the 50s and 60s was built in places where essentially those kinds of conditions, whether it's up against the freeway or on the other side of the tracks or next to the cemetery or any variety of neighborhoods that we've worked in where those kind of conditions existed. And what was unique about Arthur Capper is that, lo and behold, it was so close to, say, the United States Capitol, right? It was so close to Capitol Hill and the housing that, is a very wonderful neighborhood just on the other side of that freeway. And so how to sort of replicate that sort of quality of life and make it be in such a way that you're close enough to transit, you're close enough to job opportunities and other amenities in the community that would make it now desirable to live there, not only people who didn't have a choice about where they were living before, but also people who do have a choice, who could pay a market rate price for a new home or a rental apartment, and want that because it was a desirable place to be. So that shift from nobody would want to choose to live in that community to now people paying, market rate for the opportunity to live there is such an important, I think, dramatic shift that we can all learn lessons from in the way we think about transformation.
Well, Tom, thank you so very much. I wanted to share just one thing is that I remember in '93 being in Alexandria at that first meeting of the Congress of the New Urbanism. I remember sitting amongst a group of people, largely a group of people that spent a lot of time in New York. I won't give any names. Mm-hmm. And I remember that group of people scoffing at Liz and Andreas's ideas and saying, well, this is nothing but the new suburbanism. And I remember thinking about that and being troubled because I was kind of caught between two worlds, the Liz and Andreas world, and really seeing the innovation that was going on there and the thinking, rebirth, of revitalization of principles of urbanism that had been forgotten in the earlier part of the 20th century. And I really think that what was interesting is that you guys didn't shy away from that, and you guys really made the new urbanism urban in a way that perhaps Liz and Andreas can be a little bit envious of what you guys have done over the years, and done it in a way that is quite tremendous and has helped to rebuild our cities close by and cities far away. So you really have a lot to be proud of, and we're very proud to have you guys as partners with us for so many years and supporters of us for so many years. Thank you so very much for your great work.